This morning and turn to the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah in our Old Testament. Let's see, it's right after Ezra, right before Esther, isn't it? Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, yeah. And Job, Psalms, and Proverbs right after Esther. So if you turn to your middle of the Bible and find Psalms, you can turn back a few books and you'll find Nehemiah. And that's where we're going to be this morning. Probably next week, if we don't hear any more cases, or if the kids aren't, having symptoms or anything like that, we'll probably start Sunday school with the kids up probably next week. I was pondering it this Sunday, but I was thinking to myself, having kids in that close quarters might not be a good idea yet. So we were thinking maybe next week getting that started again as far as Sunday school goes. Brother Mark is traveling. He asked me to cover Sunday school for him. He is traveling, and he and Miss Tracy and Daniel went to go see Brother Mark and Miss Tracy's first grandchild in Indiana. And so they're just, pray for them. They're praying that they don't have COVID. They don't really want to give COVID, and they don't know it. They don't want to give the baby COVID. So anyways, pray for them as they travel and such as that. But this morning we're going to be in Nehemiah, and I don't know why, but this format, this idea just came to me as far as teaching Nehemiah and maybe giving you some perspective on some other things. But just to end kind of, I'll tell you what, let's start off with a word of prayer. Dad, do you mind lifting up the Sunday school hour in prayer, please?
Lord, we're thankful for today. Thank you for your loving kindness. Thank you, Lord, for helping us in our problems, our needs. And pray for Joel this morning in the lesson. Thank you for each one that's here that's taken the time. And down direct our lives, and ask in Jesus' name, amen.
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 All right. Nehemiah is one of my favorite books of the Bible. It's pretty interesting. I'm going to go ahead and say story, because it's a really neat account. No, it's a neat narrative that goes on here, and it's an encouraging book. It's an encouraging book. It's a challenging book. It also calls you to be challenged a little bit. Nehemiah, just in the way of introduction, records the third return from captivity and the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem. Okay, and so just a little bit of a recap, that's why, is this pointed? Sonny, would you mind coming and pointing the camera at this board real quick? Just in the way of recap, we've been doing a survey of the Bible. We've been kind of going over it a little bit. And I didn't start off with Job, because really Job always gets lumped into what's called the wisdom literature. Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. They're the 5 books of wisdom literature, and they're always lumped together. That's why they're in the middle of the Bible. The rest of them are historical. We really don't know we don't know for certain when it was written. The best guess is probably during Genesis. And there's certain reasons for that. He never mentions the law. Not once does he mention the law of Moses. He talks about things that you probably would have seen in the original creation. For example, he talks about dinosaurs. He talks about dragons, like actual dragons. God said, take a look at Leviathan for a second in Job chapter 41. And then he goes on to describe a literal fire-breathing dragon. So apparently Job saw that. And apparently he saw a creature called Behemoth mentioned in Job chapter 40. And so that's why and that seems to be a long-necked dinosaur, apparently. So God was saying, hey, have you ever, behold Behemoth, he said. So apparently he knew what that looked like. And more people are discovering, oh wait, human beings did live when dinosaurs lived. Isn't that something? They're catching up to the Bible. Job could have told them that a long time ago. You say, well, he didn't call it a dinosaur. No, the word dinosaur was invented in the 1800s. There's no way he would have known to call it a dinosaur. He called it behemoth, or he called it leviathan. And the Bible actually tells us in Isaiah chapter 27, the leviathan is the dragon. And in Job chapter 41, the bigger picture, it's talking about the devil. Because in Revelation, what's he called? The dragon. And so that's the bigger picture. Anyway, Job probably takes... Do you see why people think he took place during the time of Genesis? And that would make a lot of sense. We'll bounce back, I think, after the book of Revelation and look at the wisdom literature after that. Probably after going through the New Testament, because I'm trying to keep on the chronological... I didn't mean to chase that rabbit. Anyways, we started off in Genesis. We went through Joshua. The book of Ruth takes place during the book of Judges. It'll tell you that in Ruth chapter 1. It says during the time of the judges. Okay, so it dates it for you. 1 Samuel is the last judge, and he anoints the first two kings, which leads you into the kingdom era. 2 Samuel covers the second king, David. It's all about David in 2 Samuel. 1 Chronicles is the same story of 2 Samuel. Okay? It's just Ezra is writing the book of 1 Chronicles to remind the people of where they're coming from and all that. 1 Kings and 2 Kings is the same as 2 Chronicles. People believe Jeremiah probably wrote that book. The books of Isaiah all the way through Zephaniah, all those prophets take place during 2 Kings. And then you come to Ezra, and the prophets Haggai and Zechariah preached during the time of Ezra. The book of Esther takes place right in the middle of the book of Ezra. And then you come to Nehemiah, and Malachi will come after that. So we are on the last historical book of the Old Testament this morning. And we haven't yet got to Malachi, but once we do, the only Old Testament books that we haven't covered are the wisdom literature, which we will probably get to after the New Testament. So that gives you a picture of where we're at in our survey, okay? Does that make sense? We are now at Nehemiah. And Nehemiah, again, during the book of Ezra, and this is the reason I was explaining all that, at the end of 2 Kings, the people get conquered by a nation called Babylon. They have a king named Nebuchadnezzar. He's world famous. He became a very powerful king. And Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem. He conquered them 3 times. There were 3 times that people were carried into captivity. Big movements of Jews going into captivity. The prophet Daniel was amongst the first group that went. Ezekiel was amongst the second group that went. And then there was a third conquering. And that third conquering of Jerusalem was the most brutal, because Babylon was tired of dealing with them. They were tired of Jerusalem rebelling. You know, it's kind of like, Theron, come here for a minute. Come here for a minute. Okay. Do what you're told. Now tell me no.
No.
Now do what you're told. Say no.
No.
My treatment of him gets a little worse every time. Now, come here. Come here, third time. Do what you're told. Say no. Okay, and that was what Babylon was doing with Jerusalem. I know that there was nothing funny about what was going on with Jerusalem. Babylon said, do what you're told. They said no. Babylon said, do what you're told. 11 years later, they say no, and bigger hit. They say, Babylon says, do what you're told. 11 years later, they say no, and Babylon says, I am tired of dealing with this. And that's where you will find the book of Lamentations is written after. That's the saddest book, probably the saddest book in the whole Bible. It's just the word lamentation means deep, sorrowful mourning. That's what it means, and that's what produced the book of Lamentations, was that third conquering by the Babylonians. They then go into prison, basically, they become slaves in Babylon for the next 70 years. At the end of the 70 years, a guy named Zerubbabel, and he's the political leader, and his spiritual leader, Jeshua, lead a return back to the promised land, and that's covered in the first part of the book of Ezra. Ezra writes that down for us. Then after that, the book of Esther occurs. The Jews that are still in Babylon, they nearly get wiped out. She saves the day. The Lord uses her to save the day. And then Ezra leads a second return at the end of the book of Ezra. Nehemiah leads the third return. Okay? And so they're leading all these people back to the promised land. And that's where you find us in the book of Nehemiah. They're leading the third return. Now, in the book of Ezra, we're told about the rebuilding of the temple. And Haggai preached that they need to get back to rebuilding the temple. Zechariah said, hey, we need to get back to rebuilding the temple. Haggai was saying we need to rebuild the temple because think about one day when the millennial temple is here and there's this focus on the temple. Zechariah was saying, hey, we need to rebuild the temple because the Messiah is coming. We need to think about the Messiah. See, that's the same thing in our day. We need to get to work serving the Lord in our own life. We need to get to work serving the Lord, trying to reach others. And why? Because the Messiah is coming. It's the same message. He's coming back. He's not coming the first time. The first time he came as a baby. The second time he comes, he's going to be in the clouds. He's going to call us up there. He's coming. The Messiah is coming. Same message. Let's get busy serving him because here he comes. So they rebuild the temple, they get it rebuilt, and Ezra leads them in some spiritual revivals. After that, though, the rest of the city is still in ruins. A lot of ruins are going on. They've rebuilt the temple, they've had a spiritual revival, but a lot of their physical surroundings are still a wreck. Okay? Still the wreckage from war is still showing. The walls are still destroyed and such as that. Now, what you'll notice there is they do have their priorities straight. Think about this. Think about this. They start off putting the Lord first. Rebuilding the temple. And then they start getting their lives spiritually in line with the Lord, right? They start having some revivals. And then Nehemiah comes along and focuses on getting some of their physical issues taken care of. Let's rebuild the wall. Notice they didn't rebuild the wall first. They're going to rebuild the wall third. After you rebuild the temple. After you start getting your life, having some revival in your own personal life with the Lord. After that, the Lord will start taking care of a lot more of your physical needs. See, the wall, all it is it keeps physical enemies out. That's it. It's not as important as that temple. It's not as important as your spiritual needs in your life. You get those things lined up, the Lord will start taking care of your physical needs, starts getting those things in line. And that's the Bible order of things. Nehemiah is a younger man than Ezra, but they are alive and working in Israel around the same time. In fact, you'll find in Nehemiah chapter 8, Ezra publicly reads the book of the law. And so you'll find the man Ezra is also in the book of Nehemiah. Much of the book of Nehemiah is obviously the first-hand account of Nehemiah, so he probably wrote it. Some people believe maybe Ezra wrote it down from Nehemiah's words. Nehemiah was the cupbearer to the Persian king Artaxerxes. We mentioned him Wednesday night, that he made a decree and gave Ezra permission to lead some people back. And Artaxerxes is the son of Xerxes. In other words, that makes him the stepson of Esther. And a lot of Bible scholars believe that Esther had a big impact on Artaxerxes. And you'll find him mentioned, look at Nehemiah chapter 2 and verse 1. It says, "And it came to pass in the month Nisan, in the 20th year of Artaxerxes the king, that wine was before him, and I, Nehemiah, took up the wine and gave it unto the king. Now I had not been before time sad in his presence." And so you find here Nehemiah is the cupbearer of Artaxerxes the king. Now the cupbearer, people would try to assassinate kings. You know, we found in the book of Esther that an assassination attempt was on Artaxerxes' dad. And Mordecai foiled it. And Mordecai really rose up the ranks because of that. later on, as I discovered, he was actually killed. That king actually wound up being assassinated later on. I think he only reigned for about 16 years, and then some people killed him. And then his son began to reign in his stead, Artaxerxes. So you have to realize that as a king, I just got finished reading a book about the last year of the Civil War, and man, it was interesting. It was interesting about the challenges that Abraham Lincoln had and things like that. I was pretty stunned that during a civil war, you could actually walk into the White House, into the Oval Office, and have a conversation with Abraham Lincoln. I thought, wow, that's great. That was a different time, wasn't it? Just a very different time. And of course, later on, that wound up being his undoing, his lax security. But I mean, that's just different. Artaxerxes, though, in this day, he's very well aware his dad has been killed. Okay, his dad has been assassinated. So to be the cupbearer, you're to taste that stuff before the king ever tastes it, because just in case someone tried to poison the king. See, that's Nehemiah's job. It's actually, there's some danger in his job being the cupbearer of the king, because if somebody wanted to poison the king, you die first. You're the taste tester. And so you'll be the one that dies, and then the king won't drink the wine. So you're a very trusted person. The king has to trust you to let you that close, because you could taste it and be fine, and you could sneak the poison in there. So basically, you have to be a pretty trustworthy guy. It mentioned in verse 1 there that he was sad in his presence. That would be bad. If you're the cupbearer and you're sad in the king's presence, that could show that, oh, there's danger. And all of a sudden the king's guard could come up and things of that nature. So there's a lot of things going on here in the book of Nehemiah. He was the cupbearer of Artaxerxes, but his concern for his homeland prompted him to leave a life of luxury and ease, to labor and lead his people to rebuild Jerusalem's walls, a task completed amazingly in only 52 days. His harder tasks, however, still lay ahead. The reviving of the people required years of his leadership. It should be now, and this is very important to remember. Nehemiah is not a priest or a prophet or the son of a prophet. He's not in the priestly line. He's not in the kingly line. He's just an average, everyday guy. Okay? He's the cupbearer. He's a slave. He's a nobody, right? But he's a somebody with the Lord. He's what you call a layman. He's just your normal everyday guy who got a burden for the Lord's work. He got a burden for the Lord's work. The date of this book is somewhere between 444. It takes place from 444 to 432 BC. It's 12 years after the second return, led by Ezra, and it's 90 years after the first return. And I've already covered that information. Here's a neat comparison to make. Nehemiah lived and ministered at the same time as the older Ezra. Ezra was a priest and Bible teacher. His main job concerned the purification of the people of Jerusalem, spiritual purification. Nehemiah was a politician and builder. His main job concerned the protection of the people of Jerusalem. The books of Ezra and Nehemiah are so linked that for centuries the Jews combined them into one book, and Nehemiah picking up the historical flow of Ezra. And that's, that's what I'm saying. Think about this. The reason America is going to crumble is if they don't get right with God. If America doesn't get right spiritually, they're going to crumble. No matter how strong your military is, no matter how strong your walls are, getting your priorities straight there saves the day. Israel was getting their priorities straight. They were focusing on God. They were focusing on getting spiritually pure in their own lives. And then God said, you know what? We can rebuild those walls. We can start rebuilding that military. We can start, you can start having some political peace. I'll give you a politician here worth something. I'll give you Nehemiah. Who do we have? Who's on our voting ticket? Guys that really aren't worth much on either side. It's pretty sad stuff. And so you say, Brother Joe, why is the political situation such a mess in our day? Have you looked at our spiritual situation? Have you looked at our churches? Have you looked at, are people getting saved left and right? Are people turning to the Lord everywhere? That's pretty easy to see why the political situation is such a mess. Our spiritual situation is a mess. We love security in America. America hasn't fought a war on American soil since, would it be the 1860s, 1880s? There were wars that went on in Texas and with Comanches and such as in the 1880s and such. That's been it. World War II. Oh, I take that back. There was a couple of battles on American soil in World War II in Alaska, on a couple of islands that no one's ever heard of. And on one of them, we shot each other because there was confusion and the Japanese weren't even there. We've been pretty secure, wouldn't you say? I was reading a book the other day. Hitler was doomed to fail from the start. He didn't have any aircraft carriers. If you don't have any aircraft carriers, you can't hit America. Why did we beat the Japanese? Aircraft carriers. I mean, it's that simple. He focused on submarines. It's really looking, hindsight's 20/20. They didn't know how important that was back then. But we look back and we're like, duh. One of the reasons a lot of people are so concerned about China right now is because they're developing aircraft carriers. Why do you do that? So that you can hit people from anywhere, at any time. That's why it's people are kind of getting the hair standing up on the back of their neck about that. Why are you doing that? Why are you building those? So, why did I even get into all that? I don't even know where. Oh, America has been pretty secure. We've been pretty comfortable, have we not? That's why the Cuban Missile Crisis was that in the 60s or was that in the? That was in the early 60s because JFK was from 1960 to 1963, and so that was in the early 60s when Khrushchev put missiles in Cuba, and so Florida was so threatened all of a sudden, and that was a big deal. Why? Because we had our security threatened all of a sudden. All of a sudden we were in danger. But just we haven't fought any battles here since the Civil War, and so we've had 150 years of peace, and we feel so secure. Let those walls come down a little bit. Let some of those physical defenses crumble, and see if people come back to the Lord. All of a sudden they'll need Him. I think that's why He's allowing the coronavirus. I don't think He's targeting. I don't think He's Miss Risa. I'm going to target her with this, or Brother Benny. I don't think He's doing that. I think He's just allowing it to hit America. It rains on the just and the unjust. It says. He's not necessarily. I want to shut down my churches. That's not what He's doing. But He's going, you know what? I need America to wake up. And so I will allow this. I think He's going to allow more before it's all over with. I think He's got to allow those walls to crumble a little bit, those walls of protection, and that we feel so secure. We feel like everything's all right. I think He's going to allow our economy to collapse at some point. We feel so secure. I just go to the ATM, get the dollar bills out. What happens one day when you can't do that? What happens one day if they have a bank crash? It happened in the 1920s. That was just 100 years ago. They called it the Great Depression after that. Suicide rates just skyrocketed after that, they said. I can't imagine what's coming. I know this. People need to get right with the Lord. People need to get right with Him. I like my walls. I like security. I like comfort. But we're going to lose those. We're going to lose those if we don't get right with God, start serving Him. If Christians don't start serving Him, if lost people don't start getting saved, we're going to see those walls crumble. Nehemiah was the trusted cupbearer to Artaxerxes. In December of 446 BC, Hanani, who is Nehemiah's brother, arrived from Jerusalem with heartbreaking news. Take a look at Nehemiah chapter 1 and verse number 1. It says, "The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah, And it came to pass in the month Chislew, in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan the palace, that Hanani, one of my brethren, came, he and certain men of Judah, and I asked them concerning the Jews that had escaped, which were left of the captivity, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said unto me, the remnant that are left of the captivity, there in the province, are in great affliction and reproach. The wall of Jerusalem also is broken down, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. And it came to pass, when I heard these words, that I sat down and wept and mourned certain days, and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. And so his brother Hanani comes and gives him a report that causes him great distress. Oh, they've rebuilt the temple. Oh, they've had some spiritual revival, but the city is still a ruin. The wall of Jerusalem is a mess. You know, I've noticed this. I noticed this. I remember getting right with the Lord. I remember surrendering to Him, giving Him my life, and I remember that decision. And I remember just the effect it had on my life. I started noticing things that were broken down that I didn't know were broken down before. I started noticing issues that I had. The closer that I was walking with the Lord, the more His light was shining on my life. And the more I started saying, oh, that's a mess. Oh, please don't look there. Oh, look at the time. I was watching a video the other day, and this guy, this one fellow was getting onto this other guy, and so this other guy chimed in and he said, hey, hold on a minute, you can't talk to him like that. And he said, oh, you want to speak up? He said, I can see where this is going. I want to retract my statement. Sorry, I just thought of that. As I was walking with the Lord, as I was growing in the Lord, I started to know, wow, that's broken down. That's messed up. Wow, I can't believe I let that go for so long. Wow, I let that slip by. Man, I can't believe how much that's a mess. You know, as Israel's getting right with the Lord, they're noticing more and more, oh, wow. Okay, so we've got our temple rebuilt. Yeah, we're piecing our personal lives back together. Have y'all seen the walls? Have you seen the buildings? This is a mess. That's what's happening right here. The Israelites are getting back with the Lord, and they're growing in the Lord, and they're starting to see, whoa, I need to shape up right here. I need to shape that up. I need to fix that. And there's this progression that's going on that I've already alluded to, but it bothers Nehemiah a great deal. He weeps and fasts and prays. And then Nehemiah is given permission to go back and rebuild the walls. I want to conclude the Sunday school lesson with this lesson. Let me just point this out. I don't know why this popped into my head when I was studying this out, and it's going to flow into the sermon this morning. But have you ever heard the phrase, you can't see the forest for the trees? Have you ever stopped and thought about what that phrase means? Does it mean anything to you? What does it mean to you, Mom? If you don't want to say it, you don't have to.
Well, it's been a while since I've thought about it, so.
Okay, Sonny, what does it mean? I saw you bobbing your head.
That's paying too much attention to detail to where you miss the big picture.
Okay, yeah.
So,
Okay, yeah. Paying too much attention to the detail and you miss the big picture, right? We preachers never do that. We never go into too much detail on anything, right? You can't see the forest for the trees. The meaning, like Brother Sonny just said, is you can't see the big picture because you're so focused on this one tree. You're focused on this one tree and you can't see the forest. You can't see the bigger picture that this one little bitty picture is a part of. Okay? Some people are stuck on just one tree. And that's what the phrase means. They can't see the forest. Some people are stuck on the forest and never look at the tree. Think about this. Have you ever got on a computer and zoomed in? on something? Zoomed in on a word? Zoomed in on a map? Something? Have you ever zoomed out? That's really what this is about. Some people think you ought to always be zoomed out. Don't ever zoom in. Some people think you ought to always be zoomed in. Don't ever zoom out. I was reading an author one day, and he was referring to people who are big picture people. And that's what he was talking about. He was talking about how that's detrimental. That's not good to be a big picture type person. I think the Bible has some big picture passages. Haggai. Think about this. We were just looking at Haggai the other day. What was he saying? Here was the people, and they were sad about rebuilding this temple. It's not as glorious as Solomon's temple. So what are they doing? They're focusing on their tree. And Haggai is going, hold on, don't forget the forest. There's coming a better temple, like at least 2,500 years in the future. Wouldn't you say that's more of a forest picture? There's coming this millennial temple that'll blow the socks off that one. Don't get so focused on focus on your tree, but there's a forest. There's a bigger picture. The Bible would tell us that all the time. Hey, look, Goliath is a tree, and he's a big one. But there's a forest. There's a bigger God. He has a bigger picture. He sees the whole battlefield. He sees the whole Philistine army, and he's not impressed. Yeah, there's a tree, but there's a forest. There's a bigger picture. I tell you, if you've ever flown in a plane and you look out that window and you look down and you see those semi-trucks are like that big. Really puts it into perspective, doesn't it? Wow, I'm not as big as I think. This is actually the reason I started doing a Bible survey. Because most of the time I like to get into a book of the Bible and focus on it. You know what I'm doing? Tree. If you're not careful, you can forget about the forest. And that tree fits into a bigger forest, right? Okay, and the reason I'm explaining that, when we were going through Genesis, I think I stopped on Genesis chapter 26 for like 20 sermons, if I remember correctly. And we focused on Abraham's servant. There's nothing wrong with that. I like doing that because that's how deep the Bible is. You can focus, and man, this tree has this piece of bark right here, and this piece of bark right here, and it has a leaf. And then there's this limb right here, and the tree is beautiful. It's absolutely wonderful. But then you take a step back and you go, whoa, it's part of a really beautiful forest, and a really awesome forest. That's really what Nehemiah is doing. Think about this. He's focused on his tree. He's a cupbearer. He's focused on his life. He's got a good life. It's a life of luxury. He's putting his life back together. He's got a wonderful life. He's serving the Lord. He's got a wonderful relationship with the Lord. Things are going great. He's got it made. He lives in a palace. He sees gold everywhere. He's surrounded by beauty and everything. And then his brother comes in and says, have you seen the forest? It's a wreck. The walls are a ruin. Yeah, things are going fine for you, but have you paid attention to everybody else? And all of a sudden Nehemiah goes, oh, the big picture. I should fast and pray and mourn. And all of a sudden it burdens him. Nehemiah, while focused on his tree, finds out about the forest. And the tree's fine, but the forest not so much. Zoomed in looks pretty good. Zoomed out. I tell you, our day looks fine. I mean, we live in peace. Everything looks fine. But when you take a step back and look at where things are going, that's why preachers start getting a little edgy. That's why guys who are in their Bible start seeing bigger picture a little bit, God's view of where things are going. You go, oh, hold on. Big picture's not good. That's why these teenagers will walk around like they've got the whole world in their hands, like they're in charge, and the adults go, oh, you have no idea. You have not seen the bigger picture yet. And the teenagers are, and the adults are like, there's a cliff. You're about to walk off a cliff. That's why they start going, oh, I wish you could see the bigger picture where those drugs are leading you. I wish you could see the bigger picture where that relationship's leading you. I wish you could see the bigger picture where that addiction is leading you, or that, and so on and so forth. And so it pays to see both, doesn't it? I think that's one of the principles in the Bible. You know, sometimes I've heard of preachers losing their family because they were so focused on the church. The church was the bigger picture. They didn't look at the tree at all. And that's detrimental. But then I've heard of some preachers who it's all about the tree and they don't even pay attention to the church. And that's detrimental. You see where the balance, a good balance, of seeing both views is a good idea. Trying to seek both views. The goal of any church, listen to this. The goal of any church should be doing well and looking well. You know, it should show whether you're zoomed in or zoomed out. Sometimes you zoom in on certain families in a church and things are going pretty good. You zoom out a little bit and there's some work that needs to be done. There's some walls that need to be built. There's some rebuilding that needs to happen. You see how this can apply in any of these areas? The book of Nehemiah is a very important book for our day. Okay? It's not just back then. How does Nehemiah respond to this view of the forest? And I love this. This is something I wanted to share with you from Brother John Yates. Listen to this. Nehemiah goes into a period of deep mourning, fasting, repentance, prayer, and confession of the sins of the people. You'll find this in Nehemiah chapter 1, verses 4 through 7, if you want to read it. Nehemiah then calls upon God, beginning in verse number 8 through 11. He prays. He calls on God to remember His covenant promise to restore His people to their land after scattering them for their sin. Now remember, Nehemiah is a regular, everyday guy. He's a regular, everyday church member. How would you respond if someone had brought you, hey, man, you ought to see the forest. It's burnt down. It's awful. You know, the trees are in disrepair, all this. Would you have responded with cliche? Oh, that's too bad. I'll put it on my prayer list. Isn't that the cliche answer? Would you have responded with criticism? They should have done something about that. The remnant, those people in Jerusalem should have done something about that. Would you have responded with callousness? It's not my problem. There's nothing I can do about it. Would you have responded with a cop-out? I'm only a layman. The priests and that pastor should do something about it. They should do something about it. Would you respond with conceit? If I had been in charge... People respond like that all the time. Well, if I was president or if I was the mayor, I was just listening. Fernie, my son Theron was watching Berenstain Bears, and Papa Bear, he's going to run for mayor because the mayor doesn't know what he's doing. And after he runs for it a little while, he starts figuring, oh wow, the mayor does kind of know what he's doing. And so, if I had been in charge, carelessness. He could have jumped ahead of God. This is scary to me too. He could have jumped ahead of God and tried to solve the problem or approach the king without prayer and patience. Instead, he stops, he mourns, he prays and fasts, and he seeks the Lord's will and what to do. He gets serious. He gets a burden. Can I encourage you, as a church member, as a pastor, as who, we've got to get a burden. We've got to take a look out here and see the forest. Hey, I like my life. I like my tree. I really do. I feel like my trees do. And there are times to focus on that tree. But we've got to take a look at the forest out here. And we've got to get a burden. We've got to go, you know what? I want to reach my coworker. You know what? Lord, how do I do that? Start praying about that. Maybe even fast about that person. I want to reach my coworker. I want to reach my family member. Lord, how do I reach my family member? How do I reach my grandkid? How do I reach my kid? How do I reach... I'll tell you, the other day, I don't know, I was feeling uneasy about my children. I hadn't been spending as much time with them lately, and so I just stopped and said, Lord, please help me with my kids. Lord, please help me with my kids. I just felt prompted right there. I had a burden to stop and pray. Listen, we've got to get a burden. Nehemiah gets a burden, and he responds well to it. He starts praying. He starts fasting. Do you have a burden for your coworker? Do you have a burden for your family? Do you have a burden for America? Do you have a burden for Choctaw people? Do you have a burden? You want to reach them? Think about this. If no one gets a burden, then missionaries don't go anywhere. Think about this. Do you have a burden to support missionaries? That'd be a good thing to get a burden for, right? How about getting a burden for a Sunday school class? How about getting a burden for a van route? How about getting a burden? Nehemiah got a burden. In the preaching time, I want to focus in on what he does in response to that burden. Let's close the Sunday school hour in prayer. Brother Sonny, will you dismiss us in prayer, please?
Lord, thank